In other world news, the coup in Gabon is being condemned by the United Nations, the African Union and France. Military leaders have appointed Army General Brice Oligui Nguema as transitional leader. Deposed President Ali Bongo is still under house arrest and the government has been dissolved. Bongo has been appealing to his people to rise up, but his downfall on Wednesday sparked jubilation across Gabon. The Bongo family has ruled the oil-rich but impoverished country for 55 years. Nicolas Haque is following developments from Dakar, Senegal.
Celebrations on the streets of the capital Libreville. Gabon free, Gabon liberated, they chant. Crowds waving palm leaves in a sign of victory hug Gabonese soldiers hours after they carried out their coup.
We are so happy. There is a sense of joy. We are waiting for this moment for so long. We suffered so much.
Officers chant the name of the man leading the coup. General Brice Oligui Nguema has been named as transition leader in Gabon. He is the head of the Presidential Guard, which pledged to protect President Ali Bongo. A close aide to Bongo, Oligui put Bongo under house arrest, bringing to an end the 56-year-long Bongo family dynasty. Ali Bongo, once seen as strong and invincible, appearing desperate and alone, appealing for help from his palace where he's being detained.
So I'm calling you to make noise, really. I'm thanking you.
A call that has fallen on deaf ears following the presidential election on Saturday. The vote was marred by massive fraud, says the opposition. Bongo ordered the shutdown of the internet and banned international observers and foreign journalists from covering the election. When Bongo's re-election was announced on Wednesday morning, the soldiers seized power. The newly formed junta revoked the election results, arresting dozens of electoral officials and accused them of treason.
We have decided to defend peace by putting an end to the current regime. The general elections of August 26th, as well as the truncated results, are cancelled. The borders are closed until further notice. All institutions of the Republic are dissolved.
The African Union has condemned the latest coup in the region, but the Gabonese people appear jubilant. They sing the national anthem and chant, "We have chased injustice and shame. Gabon has awoken to a new dawn." Nicolas, Haque, Al Jazeera.
And Nick joins us now live from Senegal. So Nick, tell us more first about the new leader in Gabon. Who's Brice Oligui Nguema?
Well, Brice Oligui Nguema is known to the elite in Gabon and is known to the Gabonese public. He was a close aide to Ali Bongo's father, Omar Bongo. And then when in 2009 he died and Ali Bongo became the president, he was sidelined and brought to Dakar, Senegal, where I am here, where he was the defense attaché, and then in Morocco. During that time, the young colonel amassed quite a considerable amount of wealth, building homes, multi-million-dollar homes in the United States and also in Gabon. And he was brought back in 2009 when there was a coup attempt. And remember, Ali Bongo suffered a stroke. He was there to be the head of the Presidential Guard, in effect, trying to protect the Bongo dynasty. But it turns out he was the one to bring an end to the Bongo dynasty. And so he is distant enough from the regime to appease those that are critical of the regime, to be legitimate to those that are critical of the regime. He arrested the son of Omar Bongo, announced that some of them will be charged with high treason. But he also is close enough to the regime that he has appeased those lucrative business interests that Gabon has with France and China and other players. So it's a break from the past, but also much of the same.
Right.
Fully?
As we saw in your report, Nick, there were scenes of celebration in Gabon, in Libreville. But what's been the wider reaction to this new coup in the region?
Well, we saw the international condemnation that we usually have during these coups, and from the United Nations, the European Union, the African Union, but quite a muted reaction from CEMAC. CEMAC is the regional body of the Central African countries, and that's quite surprising. But not surprising as well, because a lot of those countries that are neighboring Gabon, Equatorial Guinea or Cameroon, have aging presidents. Paul Biya has been in power since 1982. President Obiang in Equatorial Guinea has been president since 1979 fully. And so there's fear of this contagion of coups in the region. But what's interesting is that this coup has popular support inside of the country. But what we haven't heard from is the political opposition in Gabon. We haven't heard from Jean Ping, the historic opponent to the regime, and also Albert Ondo-Ossa, who was the one running against Ali Bongo during Saturday's presidential elections.
Thank you, Nick, for that. Nicolas Haque live there in Gabon in Senegal. We're going to discuss all this further now with Leonard Mbulle-Zienge, who is a researcher at the Institute for Democracy, Citizenship and Public Policy in Africa at the University of Cape Town. He's joining us via Skype from Cape Town. Thank you very much for being with us, Leonard. So your thoughts first about this new leader in Gabon. Does General Nguema really represent change when he's been part of the inner circle of the Bongo family for such a long time?
Thank you very much for having me. As your reporter highlighted, he is an insider of the regime. Not only was he working with President Ali Bongo, but he worked very closely with his father, Omar Bongo. So it shows that this is somebody who understands the inner workings of the regimes, particularly within an apparatus as strategic as the defense and security sector. So as a result, he would have a very, he'd understand how President Bongo's health, the political workings, as well as the other dynamics of society, which helped the Bongos to retain power for so long.
Right. Well, what do you think was General Nguema's main motivation for seizing power? And do you think he has a plan to move the country forward now to transition to democracy?
Well, it is alleged in certain French media that there were plans to remove Nguema from his position and replace him with Bongo's half-brother, Frédéric Bongo, who had also held the position of head of the Republican Guard before the coup in 2019. But overall, I think that they were trying to capitalize on the discontent regarding the electoral results. This is not the first time that President Bongo's election has been contested. During his first election in 2009, as well as the subsequent one in 2016, there were serious allegations that the election results had been reversed and that Bongo had actually lost. And in the lead up to the election, as well as during the election, it was believed that Albert Ondo, the opposition candidate, was going to win, and more claims were heeded to that when there was a blackout of the internet and when there was a delay in the release of the results. So you can infer that the military was trying to take advantage of the general grievances that prevailed in Gabonese society regarding Bongo's rule.
You mentioned the opposition there, and as we've heard from our correspondent, the Gabonese opposition has been somewhat cautious in its response to this coup, which came after the presidential election, which the opposition leader Albert Ondo-Ossa initially claimed to have won. Do you think the opposition can capitalize on this moment, or are they completely out of the game?
Well, it depends on what kind of transition the military decides to pursue. If they decide to control the process, or they try to highly influence it, similar to what was done in Algeria as well as in Zimbabwe when they were ousted their long-term leaders, then we can infer that the opposition is going to have a minimal influence because the military will try to put in place someone who will maintain the status quo. On the other hand, we can have a situation where the military leaders adopt the position which South American countries did during the 1980s when they were transitioning to civilian rule, whereby they do a whole-scale change of the political and economic configuration and include these opposition leaders. But right now, the situation is very fluid, and it'd be very difficult to make any conclusions in that regard.
Right. Leonard, you mentioned some of the other coups on the continent. You mentioned Zimbabwe. Of course, Nigeria has a history of coups as well. But what we've seen most recently in Africa is that these coups have been happening in former French colonies, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, now Gabon. What is it about these former French colonies that make them fertile grounds for coups?
I think it's because of the inherited political culture. Within the Francophone governance system, power is very much centralized within the president as well as the office of the presidency. So that can lead to abuse of power. It can lead to the emergence of dominant parties, and as a result, overall alienation of society. The Afrobarometer Research Network, for example, put out a poll in 2022 which stipulated that 66% of Gabonese believe that the military would do a bet. They wouldn't mind the military coming into power in the effect that elected leaders weren't doing the right job. And if you look at that particular research that was done, similar sentiments are found across Francophone African countries. So what you realize is that, you know, in these countries, you have heightened levels of corruption, you have less participatory forms of governance as a result of this prevailing political culture that was inherited from France to a large extent.
Very interesting to talk to you about this, Leonard. Thank you very much for joining us. Leonard Mbulle-Zienge from the Institute for Democracy, Citizenship and Public Policy in Africa. Thank you for your time.